Hi, I'm Diana Nightingale, and I'm so happy to be here today with a special guest that I'll be introducing you to in a few minutes. But first of all, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that through the years since Earl's been gone, one of the most gratifying things for me has been um, receiving emails, phone calls, real letters through the mail, the old-fashioned way, of people from across the United States and virtually from around the world saying how Earl's messages have impacted their lives, how some of them grew up listening to who became known as Uncle Earl because they listened to him every morning and said it always felt like he joined them for breakfast. The businessmen who would write and say that they listen to Earl on the way home from work when they'd be stuck in traffic. And it's always been really gratifying to connect with people that have a special story to tell. And as it turned out this morning, I went to our little post office and I picked up something that I received from a gal named Kim Wiseman in Michigan City, Indiana. And she contacted me a couple weeks ago and she said that I guess she works at a library or she's a librarian, I'm not sure. But anyway, in one of the big books, she had found an illustration that was signed by Earl Nightingale. And she wanted to know if there was a possibility that he may have ever drawn a cartoon or an illustration of any kind. So I talked to her and I said, oh yeah, I said, yeah, when we'd be sitting waiting to have dinner, he would draw a picture on the napkin or on a cocktail napkin. And I said, there are just so many things that people don't know about Earl Nightingale. They go, oh yeah, the strangest secret. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've read it a million times, in which time I say, no, it's a recording. Earl was not known for all the books that you have read. Those have been pirated by mostly other people. And so anyway, recently I had a conversation with a gentleman that I'm going to introduce you to. And it came on the heels of me visiting Florida before the COVID set in. And I was with my daughter, and we were staying at a very nice hotel. And in the lobby, they had all kinds of brochures of places and things to do. And in one of the slots was this beautiful brochure for Fisherman's Village. And of course, Fisherman's Village has a very special place in my heart because it's the place where I met Earl. And so after I came home, I kind of followed up to see what was written or what was being put on the internet about Fisherman's Village and how it was created by Earl Nightingale, and no mention of him whatsoever. Don Donaldson, the developer, no mention of Don. They just say that, oh yeah, the city planners did this whole thing. Well, yeah, the city planners practically had to be beaten to death in order to give the permits. So anyway, and then through LinkedIn, I met Glenn Gould. Is that that pronunciation
That's
correct?
correct.
Good. Well, anyway, welcome, Glenn. We decided we would have a chat and talk about Fisherman's Village and get the information that is accurate. And, there are millions of people that have visited Fisherman's Village through the years, and some of them know and some of them don't know that it was actually a vision of Earl's, just as wanting to go fishing was the impetus for writing The Strangest Secret. Wanting a really good meal was the reason that Fisherman's Village came into being. So anyway, welcome, Glenn. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for sharing some time with me, Diane. I really appreciate it.
Well, let's talk about your story with Fisherman's Village.
Sure. So you mentioned a million, millions of visitors. I'm going to start in the middle of the story and then I'll go back to the beginning. But it made me think, and I don't want to lose the thought that at the time that I was the president of the Punta Gorda Chamber of Commerce, which we had our office in Fisherman's Village, there were 1 million visitors a year that traveled through Fisherman's Village at that point.
Wow.
So it is an amazing destination. So my story kind of is a little interesting story when it comes to Fisherman's Village and Earl, because I call Earl my friend, my mentor. I never met him, but there's a story that he told, And I'm not exactly sure in which one of the series, or if it was maybe just in his, he had this series that he did for a long while where you'd get a tape every week from him. And he told this story about how a restaurateur had mentioned to him, that he would like to, his input on what he should do with his restaurant. And when Earl gave it to him, the restaurateur said, my chef will never go for that. But long story short, he apparently was an instrumental in Fisherman's Village. And I didn't know this. All I knew is that in one of the stories that he told this story about a place where you could go to this 2-story pier in a harbor with an elevator and a restaurant at the end. And if you wanted to go there and have a drink or have a meal or just watch the sunset, it was, in his estimation, the way I remember the story, the most beautiful place on the planet, which kind of intrigued me because I knew that he had at least been to Monterey before. And I thought he actually had spent a lot of time in Monterey. And I consider Monterey to be one of the most beautiful places on the planet. So I kind of, throughout my adult life, whenever I was traveling to Florida, I just kind of looked for the place. I never really studied it that hard. And then about 7 years into my living in Punta Gorda, I was the president of the Punta Gorda Chamber. I'm waiting on a friend. I finally look at the plaque over there at the entrance to the village, and sure enough, there's Earl Nightingale. I couldn't believe it. I'm living in the town where he had lived for a period of time and had a very powerful impact on the community. Because without Fisherman's Village, I don't really know that Punta Gorda would have ever been on the map.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you the story as I heard it from the man himself. And basically, like I say, fishing was the reason that he wrote The Strangest Secrets, so that he could go away and still have his message being heard. And he said he had breakfast in Punta Gorda, and exactly what you said. He had the conversation with the man in the restaurant, and he said it was just a little mom and pop, simple little kind of place that you would find back in the days in the 1970s. I mean, Florida was really quite beautiful then. I mean, it really, really was. And he said that he wandered, after breakfast, he just wandered about, and he came to this abandoned area, and it was where they used to bring goods in and out of the port there. And it had been abandoned many, many years prior to that. And he said he stood there, and his first thought was a restaurant. And he said, and then he had this vision of what a great place it would be. And he loved boating, and he'd always had a boat, and thought about how great it would be to have a beautiful yacht basin there and some sort of something. And the reason that he was in Punta Gorda at that particular time was because when he lived in Fort Lauderdale, he had been best friends with Don Donaldson, who was a developer. And Don had come over to Punta Gorda and had started to build a place called Emerald Point. And so as that was being developed and getting ready to go on the market, he asked Earl if he would do a radio commercial for Emerald Point. And Earl said, well, I'll have to come take a look at it. He said, friend or no friend, I don't endorse anything that I don't want my name attached to.
Right.
And so Don said, well, come on over. So Earl said he went over, and he said he not only liked the place, but he ended up buying one of the units there. And so that's what he was doing there. And now he's there, and he's looking for a really great restaurant, and he has this vision. So he said he went back home, and he said, hey, Don, he said, let's get together for a drink. He says, I have this great idea today. So he talked to Don about it, and Don said, it's a great idea, let's do it. And so they started to, put together plans. And of course, back then, timeshare was just coming in to being, which was a great concept back then, because so much of the land, especially on the waterfront properties, had been visited by people from the Midwest for many years. They had their little cottage, or they had their little place that they would come to. And now these places were being torn down, and the big high rises were going in. And basically it was going to mean that a lot of the people in the Midwest weren't going to be able to afford their trip to Florida anymore. So the early concept of timeshare really met the needs of those people that came back to the same place every year. They knew they were going to be there for a week or 2 weeks or whatever. And so Don created this beautiful pier with all of these wonderful shops. And there were a couple little barbecue places and things like that there as well. And then upstairs were these beautiful apartments that just looked out on the bay and down at the yacht basin. And I had been living in Florida for a number of years and selling real estate. I was a real estate broker for a while, and had sold luxury homes and girlfriend apartments and just all kinds of things. And then I decided I needed to take a little bit of a break, and someone talked me into becoming a rental manager for one of the condominiums. And one day the fellow in charge came over and he sat down in my office and he said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, hopefully a good job." And he said, "Well, why are you in this office?" He said, you should be over there working for me selling timeshare." And I said, "Oh, I would never sell timeshare." And he said, "Well, why not?" And I said, "Oh, well, I don't like timeshare." And he said, "What don't you like about it?" And I said, "I don't know, but I know I wouldn't like it." And he said, "Get your purse. I'm taking you on a guided tour." So we went over, and it was Island Towers on Fort Myers Beach. And we walked through, and he gave me the full presentation as though I had, just come off of the airplane from Cleveland. And when I got through, I mean, I was in tears. I said, "This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life." And so I went to work selling timeshare for him. And ultimately, some months later, I ended up going up to Fisherman's Village, and I was working as a timeshare salesperson at that time. And I knew that Earl Nightingale was a silent partner and that there was a restaurant with his name on it. But I mean, Earl Nightingale was, you know, the biggest thing about him in my life is he had been Sky King when I was a little kid, and I used to listen to him all the time. But I mean, and a lot of the personal development back then was um, teaching really how to manipulate people. I mean, it wasn't personal development at all. It was just how you could get rich quick by taking money from other people. So I wasn't interested in the personal development industry at all.
Sure.
But then there I was one Saturday morning and had to attend a meeting I did not want to attend, and it was mandatory. Don Donaldson says to me, "It's mandatory. Earl Nightingale's coming in to speak to us." And I said, "I really don't care, because, it means I have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to come to work." So anyway, I happened to be tops in sales. And so I was out of my chair a bunch of times picking up my, you get a reward like a plastic trophy. They paid 15 cents for it, says congratulations, tops in sales. And so that's where we met. And
Yeah.
so Fisherman's Village is very special to me. And if he hadn't been in search of a restaurant, Fisherman's Village would not have been built. And I guess the Lord would have had to figure out some other way for us to meet. But it's a shame, because I think that most people have no idea that this was just another one of the accomplishments and another of the wonderful things that Earl left behind. He was
Right.
very creative in so many ways.
Yeah, it's funny because you say that, and of course, I'm looking for any sign of Earl Nightingale, and I didn't even notice it. So the average person who isn't would have no way of knowing. And I'd read the stories too that the city council was the one who decided that it was important that they renovate this
Yeah,
derelict area. And I
yeah.
thought to myself, well, I wonder if Earl was on the city council then, because that's the only way that I know that it would have happened.
No, no, it was really hard to push through, because you know, in the 70s, I mean, the young people today have no idea of how quickly people can come up with an idea and get the job done in today's world. And back then, nobody wanted change. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
I mean, and if it was a new innovative idea, no, we're not going to do that. And it was, it was like pulling teeth, and it was not something that, and I mean, people came, but not a lot of people.
In the chamber business, we called them NIMBYs, not in my backyard. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
no
right.
way, don't do it. I wanted to stay safe, and it wasn't. Truth is, when I was in early 2000s, when I was down there, it wasn't much different. It took Hurricane Charlie to really change things in that part of Central Florida, Southwest Florida, because Fort Myers had obviously changed, Sarasota had obviously changed, but in between, it was very, very much old Florida still.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to have a place in Punta Gorda. I would just,
Yeah.
I would dearly love to have a place there. I don't think I could give up my mountains, and of course, my kids and grandkids and now great grandkids are here, so I wouldn't want to leave here permanently. But I sure wouldn't mind having a place down there to go to maybe a couple times a year.
It's a
But
beautiful place.
it really is. And back the first time I lived in Florida was in 1962, and I lived at Fort Myers Beach, and there were no connecting bridges.
Right.
You couldn't go to Sanibel unless you took the ferry boat out. We had a swing bridge that opened on every half hour at Fort Myers Beach, and sometimes it got stuck and you couldn't get home.
Yeah.
The other end going to Bonita, there was nothing there. And I remember everybody had a big hairy fit when the bridges went in. And it's changed. I mean, I remember Florida where there was nothing on the beaches except Australian pines and lots of shells. And before the tourists came in and gathered up the shells and turned them into things for your den and, you
Sure.
know.
Yeah.
But
So
yeah.
how did you end up in Florida? At that time, I know you said 62. You were down there the first time, but how'd you end up at that particular time when Earl was there?
Well, of course, there was an age difference between Earl and myself,
Mhm.
and we'd both been married before. And the kid's dad and I had gone to Florida in 1961, and we tried to live there, but we couldn't because there wasn't anything to do.
Nothing to do. Yeah.
And you'd go to the local stores and there'd be a sign on the door that said gone fishing. You go, oh well, that's okay. I mean, it was okay. And then we went back in 71. We went back to Ohio for a while, and then we went back in 71. And soon after that, the kid's dad and I had a very, very friendly separation. And then I went into real estate. And
And you stayed down there for a while, I guess.
oh yeah, I was there for, well, 11 years.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
And then did you guys go to Arizona after that, or?
Well, it was interesting because I lived there in Florida, and Earl lived in Carmel, California.
Right.
And so we got together, and I moved to Carmel, and we were in Carmel, and then we we went back to Florida for a while. We were in Naples, and then we came to Arizona on a to play golf. And Earl wanted to show me around because this is where his radio career had started.
Yeah.
And he found a house that he liked, and we bought it that day, and we moved here. And he said, this is the house I want to live in for the rest of my life. And unfortunately, the rest of his life wasn't all that long, but
Yeah.
he was a happy man. Yeah. And always looking for a good restaurant and a good cup of coffee.
I imagine so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me, if you would, just because I'm curious, what a typical day was like being around Earl Nightingale. I mean, because
There,
from what I listened to, it seems to me he was just a regular guy who had a gift of being able to put things into perspective in a simple way for people to understand that most people don't have.
yeah, there was no typical day.
Yeah.
I never knew when I got up in the morning what was going to happen by the end of the day. Earl was an early riser, and he did a lot of writing. Of course, he wrote everything that he ever recorded, but also he would wake up in the middle of the night and get a great idea, and he'd get up and maybe write for a while. Um, Typically, he liked to go out to breakfast. and lunch and dinner. And you know, when we I mean I'm a heck of a good cook. I really am. And cooking kind of runs in our family. My son had his own restaurant in San Francisco for a while. My son-in-law is a chef, and we all, the kitchen has always been a big deal to us, you know.
Yeah.
So Earl and I got married and I started cooking for him, and he said to me one day, honey, we need to have a serious conversation. And I said, okay. And he said, it's about you cooking dinner. And I said, you don't like my food? And he goes, it's not that. He said, when I was a kid, he said, we were so poor. And he said, we lived in the tent, you know, in Tent City. And he said, my brothers and I would take our wagon and go over to the WPA, which was a lot like, I guess, welfare would be today.
Yeah.
And he said, and we would get cans of food. And most of the time they didn't have labels. And he said, so when mom popped that can open, we never knew what we were going to have for dinner that night. And he said, one of the visions I had as a young man was someday I'm going to go into a restaurant and I'm going to sit down and I will look at all the choices that I have before me and I will choose what I want for dinner. So it was more about having achieved that goal of working hard enough to be able to afford to do that.
Yeah.
And he loved eating.
I'll bet he did.
Yeah.
So what about, but obviously there's a story with you too. I mean, you were a well-accomplished real estate agent, you as number one salesperson from what I understand. You know, that is part of what caught Earl's eye, I guess, because I know that he appreciated people who were achievers.
Yeah, he
So,
did.
I mean, how did you end up in real estate? I mean, you said a little bit about it, but was it something you sought out or?
No, it was one of those serendipitous things, you know. I mean, like today, this illustration that I got, and you can see that he's written something down here. This is something that he did, and he gave to Dick and Betty Hutter. And Dick was the man who worked at Columbia Records, and Earl called him after he wrote The Strangest Secret and says, I need to press a record. So, you
Yeah.
know, it's interesting because I look at life now from my perspective of all these years and I go, if only we knew there's a plan. If only we knew that every time there's a setback, every time things don't work out, it's because we're supposed to move to a different place because that's what life is all about. I mean, when Earl retired at 35 from the radio industry and decided he was going to, you know, own an insurance company, he wrote The Strangest Secret, threw it right back into radio, television, and, you know, where he was supposed to be. And so anyway, I was in Florida and was surprised when my marriage came to an end. And I, you know, had been a mom. I stayed home housewife person, dinner on the table at 5. And so I was picking up, you know, odd jobs here and there so that I'd be there available for the kids. And the gal across the street came over and she said, Diana, I have a proposition for you. And I said, oh, what's that? And she said, well, you know, she said, I work for these developers down in Bonita Springs. And she said, I love my job. And she said, but when school's out, I want to take the boys back to be with the family in Chicago for the summer. And she said, but I want my job back in September. And she said, so I asked him, if I bring in a replacement just for the summer, you have to
Wow.
promise me I can have my job back in September. And she said, and they are agreeable. And she said, but you have to leave. She said, you're going to love the job and you have to promise me that you will leave. You know, don't endear yourself to these
That's
guys
funny.
because I want to come back to my job. And so I did, and they were awesome. I mean, these guys, I mean, you got to go back to the 70s and the way life was. And these guys would be sitting around, you know, smoking cigars, playing cards in between the deals they were making. And, but they would take me along, you know, I mean, I was just a kid, basically. I was 30 some, well, I guess I was older than that, but yeah, no, I was in my 30s by then.
Yeah.
And they would go out to look at land that they wanted to develop, and they'd take me out there, and I'd have to hold the tape measure, and they'd tell me all this stuff. And I fell in love with real estate. And I
Right.
remember one day, the one fellow said to me, "Come here and stand by the window with me." And he said, "What do you see?" And I said, "I see the Gulf. I see white sand." He said, "What else?" I said, "I see, miles of Australian pines." He said, "What else?" I said, "I see birds." And he said, "Well, girl, when you look out there and you see $1 million condominiums," he said, "I will know I've done a good job."
That is so funny because I sold cars for a short period of time, and I have a very similar story about my guy Big Tim, who put his arm around me, and I'm at Frank Parra Chevrolet on 183 in Irving, Texas. He puts his arm around me, and I mean, he barely, my shoulder barely goes pat to his elbow. He's this huge guy, and he talks in that big Texan voice. He goes, "Son, what do you see out there?" And I said, "I see cars, Big Tim." He goes, "I see commissions." So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, so then in September, keeping my word, I went to real estate school, and I got my
okay,
real estate license. And then a year later, I got my broker's license, and I just loved it. I mean, to me, it was like dying and going to heaven. I mean, I would be riding around. I had a little Volkswagen convertible, and I'd be out in the sunshine delivering contracts, picking up these commissions, and it
how
was
delightful.
it was wonderful. I loved it, and I miss it. I have an inactive real estate license, and every now and then, I think maybe, but things have changed a lot. So, and I
Right.
keep busy with all of Earl's stuff. It'll be 32 years that he's been gone, and this is all I've done for
Wow.
speaking, authoring, coaching, just keeping his stuff alive. And sometimes I get angry. I get really out outrageously angry that the pirates are, using Earl's things without license, and many of them making money off of them.
Yeah.
But I think to myself, my goal was to keep his work alive all over the world. And I go, so I just look at them like helpers.
Sure. It's
you
all you
know,
can do.
yeah, they're my helpers. They're
Yeah.
reaching the audience of people who want something for free,
Right.
you know, and which, the other part of that, I've been selling Earl's stuff for all of these years. I've never had anyone ask for a refund ever. I mean, they know what they're getting
Right.
when they get Earl's things. So it's been really gratifying, and I'm really glad that you reached out to me, and we get to share our story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was funny because I reached out to you on LinkedIn, and
Yep.
when I sent the request to connect, I said, there's no way she's going to reply. But if she does, wouldn't that be fun? And when you did, it was like, do I dare send her the story? I said, "What the heck? I'll send her the story." And you were so gracious, and it was really it was a very special moment. I went around to everybody in my business here telling the story. You won't believe the story. You won't believe who I've connected with, and of course they can't appreciate what it is. But when somebody has had an impact on your life, the way that Earl had on mine, and then to have him still be alive, even though he's not with us, he's still alive. And through you and the work that you're doing, it's just it really. I mean, I was brought to tears that day. So
Oh, that's very sweet. But Earl was the same way. He used to say in his radio shows, Diana and I are living in Carmel, or Diana and I are in Arizona, or we're in Florida, or wherever. And so people would be traveling, and they'd say, you know, let's look in the phone book and see if he's listed.
yeah,
And so there it be, and so they let's call him up, you know. I mean, these were adults acting like 12-year-olds, and so they'd call and he'd go, "Hello, this is Earl Nightingale," and they go, "Oh my God, it's Earl Nightingale." He says, "Yes, this is Earl Nightingale. Who's calling, please?" And they'd say, "Oh, well, we're, Mary and John from wherever."
yeah.
And he says, and we just thought I mean, we really didn't expect that you're going to answer the phone. And he says, "You want to go to lunch?" And they go, "Yeah." I'd say, "Okay, where are you? We'll meet you." And we would go, and then people would say, "You guys are real people. I mean, you show up in jeans and stuff, and you're just real people." And I said, you need to get it in your head that everybody is just real people.
Well,
I mean,
that's a great lesson for people.
yeah, I mean, basically you've achieved some sort of attention because whatever it is you do well. And so people recognize you. But, I mean, Earl would, have a fit and say, we're out of mustard. And I'd say, no, it's on the second shelf on the right-hand side of the refrigerator. And he'd say, it's not there. And I'd go out and I go, yes, it is. It's right there. Oh, well, it wasn't there a few minutes ago. So, I mean, he was
Same
a
thing everybody does.
he was just a real guy. He really was,
Yeah.
and funny. Oh my gosh, he was hysterically funny. I mean, we laughed a lot, and
Yeah.
he was a great human being. I can't tell you. I After all these years, I miss him horribly,
Yeah.
and but he's touched the lives of a lot of people, and as have I, and I get to meet
That's
people
right.
like you, and now this gal that Kim that sent me the illustration, and it's been a wonderful journey. It really, really has.
So what's next for Diana?
Don't know.
I see that your website is it looks like it's changing and growing a bit.
Yeah, I think right now there is a real need for encouragement. I think we need to keep from being discouraged. I think we need to get rid of our little things that we follow all day long. We got to stop listening to the news. I'm not going to say that we don't need to have an awareness of what's going on, but I think we
Right.
also need to have an awareness that what we are told may not be true. And I get very concerned because we are so easily led. I mean, I think back to uh, Pac-Man. Pac-Man was the first thing, and then suddenly adults got this phone, and it was so cool. And suddenly, um, people are doing this. I mean, I went on a little river cruise yesterday, or lake, actually, Sorrel Lake, and it was amazing. I never turned my phone on or anything the entire time. I could tell you every rock, every eagle I saw, everything, and everybody else was busy doing this. So they get this much, and this is what we get. We get this much of a picture of what's going on around us.
Right.
And we are just, whatever everybody's doing, that's what we're going to do. Whatever you're told to do, that's what you do. And I just feel that at the end of the day, there's so much doubt in people's minds and in their lives. And I just really think that coaching is probably more important now than it ever has been. So I'll
Sure.
probably be dedicating more time to that.
You mentioned about the we need to be encouraged and things like that. And I certainly don't have the platform that you do, but my son and I we run a lot. We run 5 days a week, and whenever I run, I usually do a video afterwards, and it's something inspirational, something just that I've heard. Yeah, I listen the whole time I'm running. I'm listening to audiobooks, and something that I've heard somewhere along the line that kind of touched me, and I elaborate on it a little bit and just try to say to people, get out there and inspire somebody today. When you do, you'll inspire yourself. And that's people like you, who still have a platform, and you're right, it can be so negative. But one thing you said, I didn't want to forget. I've kind of been dragging my feet on it, and that is about the picture. They're all trying to take a picture in the small screen that you mentioned. They forget. I mean, we all forget that, yes, this is a memory keeper. There's no doubt about it. We got pictures. Wonderful. I think it's a great thing. But by the same token, this is a memory keeper too. And we can see so much more, as you mentioned, that we'll never see if we're trying to capture something finite. And I just kind of think that that's a really powerful thought that you shared.
Well, and I think the other part of that too is that if you're putting it on here, I don't have to remember anything. I check back later and I go, bop, bop, bop. Oh yeah, there's a picture, yeah, yeah, yeah. But when you store it up here, you've got the emotion that goes with it. You bring back the joy or the disappointment. And that's how we learn. That's personal development. I mean,
Right.
it's not going to some seminar and coming home because you feel like, well, you just got to vaccinated and I'm going to have a perfect life now, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to experience personally, individually, not what everybody else is doing, not what everybody else is thinking, not jumping on, like Earl used to say, you know, we're a bunch of people following the followers and we don't even know where we're being led. And I think that in order to be at peace and to be content with yourself, you have to do a lot of time by yourself and thinking and rationalizing and asking yourself, does this make sense? You know, is talking about this going to make me feel any better? Is there anything I can do about it? And at the end of the day, if the answer is no, you've wasted your life, because life is right now. That's all you have. You know, I don't worry about tomorrow or what was or anything, because
Right.
in today's world especially, you never know what tomorrow's announcement is
Well,
going
you
to be,
surely
you know.
don't. You really don't. If anybody could have ever predicted the stuff that happens now, and here's what really worries me a little bit. I try not to worry, but it does worry me a little bit. If you think back 5 years ago and how much different the world is today in just 5 years, what's it going to be like in another? I mean, if we're fighting this year, what, who knows what we're going to have in 5 years? It's going to be
Yeah.
insane.
Well, I like to think that life does go in extreme directions, and I'm hoping we've gone as far as we need to go in this direction, and that we'll bounce back and be a little more sane. I mean, maybe the whole computer, maybe this time of being, you know, quarantined, where people will just get their fill of doing, you know, what we're hopefully not what we're doing, but I
Yeah.
mean, you know, doing everything else without human beings, you know. And I've said too, somebody said, you don't text. I said, I will never text. Well, why not? I said, well, I had a dear girlfriend, and when she turned 50, she had a massive stem cells, I can't say it, stroke. And basically, physically, she was fine, but she could never speak again. And she wore a little helmet with a little light on it. She could move her head just about that
Oh
much
my
to
goodness.
spell out. And I said, if you have ever lost anybody who is no longer able to communicate with you, you will recognize that it is a blessing too. And I said, if people want to reach me, they call me. I don't have an answering machine. You either call back or, oh well.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. You send me an email, make an appointment. We'll talk. You know, but anyway, it's been great. If you think of any other great stories or anything wonderful, let me
Well,
know.
I hope that this will be the first of many times, and I hope that somehow we'll have the opportunity to meet in person,
That would be great.
because I think that would be delightful.
Well, come out to Arizona. The
Well,
heat,
I'm trying
the
to get my
heat's
family to
over.
go for a Grand Canyon vacation. I've been there once, to the South Rim, and I've been to Sedona. I've been down to Scottsdale and Phoenix. Arizona is an amazing area of the country. Such diversity and in geography and in people, and it'd be a great trip. I'm trying to convince them that's what we need to do. I'm trying to get them over the idea that you got to wear a mask on your face for 5 hours to get there, but we'll see.
I know, I know. I said that yesterday. I said, when people say, you know, I have a headache, or I have fuzzy thing. I'm going, that's because you've been breathing in carbon dioxide for the
That's
last 3 hours. You
You're not
know,
kidding. Yeah.
I mean, this is not going out and coming in fresh and clean, you know.
Right.
And I find myself, I'll be in the store and I have to pull it out and go, fresh air. But well, you know, we have to keep our sense of humor and just learn to move forward and be positive and not let it all get us
Absolutely.
down. Yeah,
Keep
yeah.
doing positive things and keep meeting people like you. I'm really hoping that I can get out to Arizona and meet you in person. That'd be great.
Well, that I'll look forward to it. But all right,
Okay.
Glenn, let's talk soon.
Let's do it. Thanks, Diana.
All right, thank
All right.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.